What's going on? My name is Nick McHenry, and welcome to another episode of Retail Coffee Break. On today's episode, I sat down with Teddy von Ranson. Teddy spent his career working in the corporate world for Ralph Lauren before launching his own eponymous label last year. So we go over exactly what was his approach to launching this collection, launching his own label last year, as well as transitioning from the corporate world to launching your own business, which in of itself is a feat. I took a lot away from this conversation across the board from just the way he approaches his brand and business, and I hope that you do too. So let's start from the beginning. I know you spent a long career at Ralph Lauren, but what's your story? Like, how did you get into design? Just give me a recap of that, I guess.
Well, honestly, I think this has been in me my entire life. I was picking up crayons and paintbrushes at a very young age and was always very, very artistic. And I always had an affinity for fashion and style, like, helping my mother get dressed in the morning, commenting on my kindergarten t-shirts, like outfits. I think in one interview I did, I talked about, I remember this so much as a kid. I would be asked to, draw a forest animal or a bear, or it was Easter time, and it was like you had to, draw the Easter bunny. And, at like 3 and 4 years of age, I was drawing all those animals, but they always had like high heels, dresses, dangly earrings on. So I knew that I sort of we knew collectively as a family that I was going to be very artistic as I grew up. And I think, if you fast forward, by the time I hit sort of my senior years in high school, I had decided that I really wanted to channel my artistic background into fashion. And I kind of worked towards that and, went through undergrad and got a bachelor's in English. And then, and by the way, I'm Canadian. So at that time I was living still in Canada, going to a university there. And when I graduated from my undergrad, I moved to the US, first to California, went to a private school for a couple of years to study design and manufacturing and production, just really knowing that eventually I wanted to have my own company. And from there, I found myself in a really wonderful seat on the women's team at Ralph Lauren. And that's where I called home for 15 years of my career, and it was incredible. And, it just spoke to my aesthetic. I learned a ton. It was really a family environment during those years. And I worked with such talented people, and I really just kind of honed in on my craft. But, it was a huge company, and I was very, very lucky. I had a very good position on the women's team and exposure to all of our accessory brands, all of our licensed teams. I drove a lot of concept and spearheaded a lot of initiatives, whether it was the Olympics or Wimbledon or any of the other sort of special events that got thrown in our lap. So, and along the way, I was really kind of grooming and mentoring teams sort of without even knowing it. And so, I made a very, very hard decision a few years ago to pivot from that role, step away from what I kind of called the velvet curtain at that time, and take a little bit of a risk. And I was given the opportunity to launch apparel for the Fry Company, which is, I think, the second oldest apparel accessories company in the U.S. next to Levi's, and had never had apparel attached to its footwear business. And I got to fully imagine, what Fry apparel would look like. And not only that, but I had the opportunity to build a men's and a women's apparel team from the ground up. And that was incredible. And it helped me sort of fill in all of the holes and gaps that I hadn't really had to deal with in my former roles at Ralph Lauren because it was much more hands-on, and I was driving even more of the process. So when I decided to, again, pivot one more time, that was to start my own label. So you haven't heard about this label because it is very, very young. I mean, we launched in store and on the website in November, which is the traditional model for pre-spring for any fashion company. And I designed, a full 6-month flow that would start in November in the traditional pre-spring window and then continue to flow through the early winter months and into spring. So it was really amazing. I know more than ever that this was just what I was born to do. This truly is as much a passion project than anything else. And of course, I hope to see this, company grow and, I bring on more people to support me. But, in this climate, I feel very fortunate because I am so young. I am so nimble. I've had the ability to pivot and react to just the change in climate all over, certainly in this pandemic, and press pause when I need to. But I'm fortunate enough that the brand got its early visibility, its early attention. I've been working on it for probably a little over a year and a half before the pandemic hit. And, having been able to launch with my wholesale brand partner, which is the Conservatory right now. They have a store in Hudson Yards, New York, as well as, someone's trying to patch in.
It's all good.
They have a couple of stores, one in Hudson Yards, another in Dallas, and they've now opened in Napa, which is exciting. They actually opened in Napa and increased their footprint during the pandemic. So Brian Bulke, who owns and has started the Conservatory, which he's really at the forefront of this considered luxury movement. I really love the way he approaches business, and he has the right kind of disruptive behavior that he takes these risks, and I think it's matched with his intuition that he's able to kind of create these new concepts. Prior to the Conservatory, he launched a pretty well-known brand called 4510, which was a multi-labeled brand as well for luxury. So without digressing too much on that, it really, where I am right now has just positioned me to get a little bit of exposure, both at the retail level, with some prominent editors, some prominent stylists. The entertainment industry is starting to pick up a little bit on the brand, and I'm pretty confident that it's not a question of if, it's just when and how, and just continue to stay persistent.
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, congratulations on launching the first collection. And I love the Conservatory. I've followed the 4510 story for a long time. My background is in wholesale. So, big fan of what they do. And I couldn't think of a better, initial partner for you to be in than that store. I've been there several times, and it's amazing. So, major congrats on that. And, dude, I could never tell that you just launched your first collection in pre-spring because it's a pretty big collection for the first collection. The editorial looks great. The product looks great. I mean, it could be a 10-year-old collection for all I know.
Well, thank you. I love hearing that. And, it's funny because, the defensive side of me is just like, with my experience and having touched all aspects of design and being in the roles as creative director, it was important for me to showcase what I'm capable of. And I think that even as the brand is launching, part of my story right now is I did this all on my own. And it looks like there could be more people and more hands involved. And that just kind of goes along with my passion and drive to kind of create this. I think what's even more important than that, though, is, you know, having gone through various iterations in the industry, certainly on the design end, kind of strategizing through design and merchandising on, you know, what the customer is reacting to, what their needs are, and coming from companies with really strong DNA, you know, there's definitely been those cycles of, you know, the customer, you know, when I started back in, you know, the early millennium, you know, the customers really were still like identifying with a brand, shopping a look head to toe. They wanted everything. They wanted the look right off the runway. We got into this rhythm probably in more recent years where, you know, we recognized that the customers much more item driven. They didn't have loyalties from one brand to another. And if you were a multi-leveled apparel accessory brand, you not only just looked to one or two competitor companies, you actually started to say like, oh, well, like we're in the outerwear game. Like who's winning in the outerwear category? And all of a sudden you might have like a roster of a dozen or more brands based on the depth of your product that you might be competitive for various channels. So again, without sort of digressing too much into that whole area, so the point I was sort of trying to make is we got into this place where we then were very sort of item driven, and we were like, you know, it's got to look good on the floor, but at the end of the day, the customer is probably going to like invest in a couple of pieces from us, a couple of pieces from other people. They'll weave it into their wardrobe, which is the reality. But the customer, I still believe, wants to be informed on how to wear it and wants to be informed on what the designer's point of view is. And that can only happen with a fully realized collection. And for me, you know, so many people that, you know, were encouraging me to start my own line were like, this is your moment. Like, you have the ability to, you know, be forward thinking enough in, you know, your color and patterning, but there's a way that you pick up on trend, but also make it very realized for someone who might not be super into fashion or doesn't want to stand out that much in the crowd. You know, for me, and this is something Ralph used to say to us all the time, and I will continue to take it with me wherever I go, but the person wears the clothes don't wear the person. And, you know, by this, I mean, I've always participated in all levels of fashion, and I still, at the end of the day, wanted to be able to like walk around on the street and not have everyone look at me like I was so like off kilter. So I think that there's sort of that balance, and it's very much the mix of how I put things together. And sometimes it's a little bit of a juxtaposition. Sometimes it's just like slight nuances, but it informs, you know, my customer on my point of view, which is slightly different. That's all.
I think you're totally right. I mean, I've seen that with the customer too. It's like we have moved to this sort of item-driven shopping, but at the same time, there is this desire to wear the same aesthetic that the designer's kind of purveying, right? So especially for new designers, it's like I might buy a sweater from you, fall in love with the sweater, sort of like the gateway drug, and just want everything else you do, from the pants to the outerwear to you name it. So I think
totally
you're right
or
there.
You're gonna say, oh my God, like I've never seen a neon blue like leather jacket. I gotta have that leather jacket. And he showed it with a flannel shirt. Well, okay, like I got like a favorite flannel shirt or whatever, and I can wear it back and I can get that Teddy von Ranson look. Or and, you know, this touches on another point. You know, we certainly saw this happen, you know, in not so recent years, but when Eddie took over Saint Laurent, or even when Alessandro started spearheading the Gucci line, there all of a sudden the industry was starting to pick up on these ideas of like having classics built into their line, especially at the luxury level. And these were pieces that, you know, weren't ever going to really go on sale until they did. But you know, they were considered a classics selection. And you know, typically like at any time of year, even if it was off season, you know, you could ask the sales associate to try and hunt you down that like navy blue pea coat from Saint Laurent, and they would pull it from the back of the store. or you knew that it was at least going to bubble up probably in some sort of iteration the next season. And I really thought that that was smart for so many reasons. Also being a smaller brand, it just made sense. But more so, when you start to participate in the luxury level, I think that you have to give your customers a chance to get to know you, get to know the product, and give them a chance to buy it. And you can't just give them a chance in a 6-month flow. And so I, from the onset of the brand, also started to identify at least what my early classics were going to be. And these were pieces that were certainly going to live for 12 years or 12 months and maybe 24 months or more. And, I sort of have this philosophy where, when I look at the line, 50% of the line is really based on these classics. And then I like this, equation where the next 25% is a animation of the classics. So it could be the same pattern or styling, but a different color, a different fabric, or slight variations on a style to give it that newness. And then the last 25% is like totally new, like pattern, totally new block, fashion, whatever it is. And what ends up obviously going to happen over the next, couple of years is some things that I predicted were going to be classics, just don't get the leverage at the takeoff that I want, so they fall out. Mm-hmm. But things that I probably put in that I considered fashion will take off, and they'll move over and have a seat in the classics area. And I may animate them, I may broaden the color range, whatever it is. But I think the idea of letting your customer have some time with things, and by the way, it's one thing to let the customer that, might want to save up and, buy a piece or two each season. But let's also talk about once that customer does buy something, I've been in this position many times. I don't want to feel like in 6 months' time, it's going to go on sale and markdown. And I want to know that if I'm going to invest in a piece of luxury, that it's not going to kind of go on sale. And it makes you as a customer feel so much better, that, something's going to sit on the floor potentially for 2 years before things kind of start to get marked down. And I really think that that's a strong way to approach the business as we start to get our sea legs again. Just not be so fast. You can create exclusivity and scarcity just by, buying X number of units a season. And, I buy and I assort very narrow. So even if it's a classic, it has the potential of selling out in a season. We can look at the numbers and see what the demand is for the following season. So my customers should also know when they go to the website, if they fall in love with something, there's probably not very many of them out there. And, they should buy it, or they run the risk that it's going to sell out this season, and they can hope that it comes back the following season.
Right. No, absolutely. I feel like 50% is a good number, and every time I see a new collection at a trade show or whatnot, I feel like very, very rare people start there. They start. I feel like if I had to throw a number out there, people normally look at 10% as core from the get-go. At least they really start with the fashion element. I guess that's why they want to start their own line or whatnot. Do you design in that way then? You start with core and then go to, let's say, the core plus design and then go to fashion? Or is it just kind of mixed up and that's kind of how it breaks down at the end?
It's a little bit mixed up. I kind of almost feel like my fashion in a lot of ways drives it. But it's interesting because I designed in a way for so many years at Ralph that was considered proto-driven. So we would look at vintage samples, we'd look at or vintage pieces or archive pieces, and we'd sort of draw from that. And since I've started my own line, and even when I was at Fry, I started much more with fabric. And so fabric and color really draws the collection. And I fall in love with certain fabrics, and then I dream what I want them to be. And so I probably kind of design into the fashion a little bit more, but I'm constantly thinking when I'm going through even the fashion, this incredible article of leather, this is going to be a great update to my JVR racer. So, that'll be the fashion, leather jacket for the seas, or that'll be the animation of the JVR racer. Or I'll look at something else and I'll be this this wants to be like a duffel. Like I want to launch my duffel this season, and how am I going to make it feel like Teddy von Ranson and not like any other brand? And I'll also have in the back of my mind, like, look, it's interesting, like, you know, when you finally get to do a brand for yourself that's just speaking to who you are in your own DNA. And, you know, I found at least, you know, I have an affinity to certain colors and certain fabrics and certain way things are styled that, you know, I guess I've sort of known all along on the one hand, but when you really start to see yourself designing season after season and collection after collection, you start to see the rhythm. You're like, oh, I tend to like draw, you know, inspiration from this palette of colors and et cetera. So then it starts to really help when you're putting it all together, because then all of a sudden I'm like, well, like these classic pieces are going to be perfect. Like with this, like, you know, I don't have to, I've already sort of picked, you know, it's even funny. Like every time I say classics, I think about this one pant that I have that I call the Ballard right now. And it's really, you know, a love child of a military pant, a carpenter pant, with some fashion details. It's pleated. It comes in black in like this perfect color of olive drab, and which is like, you know, it's like very like all like Gurkha-y, like military color. And honestly, goodness, every time I go to add any other colors to that program, I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't need navy because it's just going to look faded and like inexpensive. And all of the other tans and neutrals, I'm like, they just like, this is such a good color of green, because like it's green when it wants to be green. It's brown when it needs to be brown. Like, it's just kind of that perfect thing. So you don't have to mess with it either.
Yeah, I love that. Knowing when not to add. It's like, okay, this is perfect. Stop. It's great.
Exactly.
Yeah. So do you think, going back, because you said you always wanted to have your own collection, and I think a lot of people who go to, you know, design school or fashion school have that in mind. Do you think going to work for 15 years before you started your own collection at a very big established company was the right path? Would you have done it sooner maybe? Or I guess, like, what have you taken away from that experience?
Well, I probably would start this whole answer on everything happens for a reason. And, you know, you could drive yourself crazy, and there's no need to, comparing yourself to other people and other people's journeys, because that's what it is. It's their journey. I know for myself, and I've said this before, having 15 years under my belt at such an established organization and getting into that sort of sweet spot of senior management, it really was like undergrad, grad, you know, master's, doctorate in fashion. So, I mean, I really came out with just like guns blazing, like knowing all of these little nuances. And for every other little thing that I needed to pick up, I picked up really quickly along the way. And, you know, I thought to myself, like, gosh, you know, why did I take this so long? But I think that going back to one of your earlier statements where you come in and you look at the line and you're like, this doesn't look like a first collection. This looks like a 10-year-old brand. That's the difference, because I'm so proud that people like you say that and recognize that, because it means the world to me, because the hard work that's been put into this by me and my small team is really complimented. But for everything that you see, whether you're on the website or in the store looking at product, there is equally an attention and sophistication to how we're even starting this company. You know, we started with a really strong board of directors. You know, my husband is chairing the company, and, you know, has his tethering between, you know, CFO, CEO position, but he's got an incredible career all of his own. But we've been able to structure it with some really big industry leaders, with our advisory board team. I'm just trying to do things right. I mean, obviously there's a perfectionist in me, so that helps. But I think having those extra years and just it's just fine tuning. It's just that added gold dust that you don't get until you're such you're so well versed in what you do.
Right. Listen, I can totally identify with that. Like it took me 10 years to work in the corporate world before I started my company. And I spend all this time every day with people who are, have been an entrepreneur since they were 16, never worked at a company ever. And I look back and I think like, I would have never known what I didn't know. I would have never learned those things had I not gone and worked for somebody else first. I think I look at it the same thing as you, as a velocity thing. Like you can work for 15 years for a brand and go in at 60 miles an hour, or you can start, your own brand 15 years in the making, start at zero and slowly work your way up. Like you had said in a very good way, everyone has a different journey. Just depends at kind of where you hit that speed.
It totally does. And then of course, like there's the people that decide to study overseas, or they come from Europe and they have that background, and that, as a, North American designer, there's a hunger for American brands to have people with European influences working on their brands, and it's all a journey. And I just come from a different angle, and it's unique. And, that's something that I really started to embrace as I started to create my own brand too, is you're in a very vulnerable position because this is you, and my name is on the label too. I started to get very comfortable and excited, probably for the first time in my life, that I'm unique and there's no one else like me. And we could digress into all of that other stuff, but that's another conversation. We'll save that for something else. But I think that that's also really being like in your own skin and having sort of that confidence. And there's nothing wrong with youthful energy. And, but, looking back on my trajectory now, like I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mm-hmm. Has anything caught you off guard or surprised you by starting your own line or your own company? You just could not have seen it coming, like, wow, this is way harder, or this is something I had to learn really quickly?
That's a really good question. There's got to be something that's like totally caught me off guard. I mean,
I'll share for me. When I first started, like, 'cause I came from corporate world where everybody had a different position. We had a marketing department and a sales department or whatever. From day one, I thought all of these things are equally important, and I had to do all of them all of a sudden by myself. So I tried to do like marketing and sales and finance and hiring all at the same time. And I did everything at like a 2 as opposed to a 10, and everything didn't work. So I think what I learned quickly is like I had to focus where, I could actually make the biggest impact, and actually just consciously let, 10 things fall to the ground because they weren't maybe as essential at that time. That was like what I took away the biggest right off the bat.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate with what you're saying. I don't know if that was a blindsided something that I learned like that quickly. But I think you definitely, when you become an entrepreneur and you start doing everything, you quickly figure out where your wheelhouse is and where your strengths are and where you need to give things a little bit more attention. And, for someone like me, I realized that, to no surprise, I always pivot back to design and creation. And even, product development was very easy for me to pick up because I think it was so closely related to the design experience. And when I'm stressed or overwhelmed, the areas that kind of like fall behind are like marketing and, kind of sort of the catch up. And so you just have to kind of, that's where discipline like comes in. I think that the only, the one thing that kind of caught me off guard, or I don't know, I will say that when you start working for yourself and you're an entrepreneur and you step away from corporate hours and the corporate experience, I don't know. I think within the first few months, you start to create your own rhythm where you're sort of ebbing and flowing with nature, and
Right.
without getting too like hocus pocus on you, like, I do really feel like that there's something about like just ebbing and flowing a little bit. And, I might not have a productive day for 1 or 2 days midweek, but then I kind of like slam it all through the weekend. And it's interesting because when you work for yourself and you've been in the corporate environment for as many years as I have, you still have this anxiety. Like if it's not 9 a.m. and you're not like sitting in front of a computer, you're not working.
Yeah.
Never mind the fact that like I might have been up at 7 and like having my first cup of coffee, but I'm already like, texting like Asia or whatever it is because it's midday there, and I'm in my underwear and I like but I don't necessarily consider that working, or because I think the corporate environment, especially when they're big and there's tiers, it's always sort of a race to get things done, because like getting things done is just the beginning, and then it's all the layers of approval and discussions and meetings getting canceled and everything. When you work for yourself, you have the beauty of like you're doing and signing off all the time. It's just you're kind of doing most of the stuff yourself.
Right. Yeah, it's true. You're always on, but you have to just choose when you're working or not working, whatever that means, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I will also say too, it can get lonely. Like, I'm used to working in a team. I don't believe that you design in a vacuum. I mean, thank goodness I have a clear point of view, and I know what I want. But I had my acting brand president, for an hour. She sits on my advisory board just to kind of go through the next collection that I'm going to launch, hopefully in the fall, and it's just great to see like other people's reactions to things and talk it through. And, I'm all about like, there is a strategic side to me. There is a right brain to complement things. Some of my merchants might not agree with me at times, but I need that need. There is that need to interact. And I would tell anybody that's, still working in corporate and might be like, frustrated that they're not, getting promoted as often, or they're not like, various things like that. One of the things that they get is they get a large team of people and to work with and socialize with, and it's a real community. And that's, being on your own, that's a sacrifice.
Right. Yeah. So how do you go about, I guess, like, how do you go about compensating for that as a solo entrepreneur? Do you have people on your team? Do you have just like other fashion designers you kind of talk with that have their own collection? How are you, I mean, you said you have your board and advisors. Do you do anything else to kind of fill that void?
I think that things just get replaced. And it's new things, it's new relationships. I spend a lot of time, because so much of my product is is manufactured here in New York. I spend my mornings kind of visiting my vendors and visiting my factories, and
awesome.
I've created new relationships, and it's a different relationship because, they're all very, very new to me, because, I've been formulating them over the last year and a half now. But besides that too, it's a different exchange, but still, I'm in there and I'm, tap dancing in front of all my sewers and making jokes, and which is great. I mean, it's a totally new experience. I think when you leave, a job after 15 years, it's like moving away from home and going to college, and knowing that you're never going to be with that family unit again. And, these are people that I spent, the most time with probably my entire life. So, that was probably the biggest, culture shock for me.
Yeah, for sure. So just to wrap up here, Teddy, because I have to hop on another call actually. Where can people follow your story? Is Instagram the best place? Is the Teddy von Ranson website? Where's the best place for people to follow the collection or news about you guys?
Well, right now I have my own Instagram, Teddy von Ranson. We don't have a corporate one yet. I wanted to keep it semi-intimate. I am making a promise to myself and to the people that are following the brand that I am going to be a little bit more interactive on my feed, and you guys can look for stories and me walking through the line a little bit more. I'm just getting my feet wet with a lot of these live videos and putting myself out there that way. And then other than that, for sure, I mean, teddyvonranson.com, that's where the line is being sold. You can download lookbooks, check the banner pages, see any initiatives that I'm working on for the brand. There'll be some exciting stuff happening next Fashion Week that will be talked about both on social media, Instagram, and then on the website. And stay tuned and let's just stay in touch, all right, Nick?
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations so much on the launch of the collection, Teddy. And seriously, I can't wait for the next collection. I'm super excited to see what you have in store after only one full ship season, I guess. Plus fall is my favorite season. So
I know. Well, it's our chance to layer.
Exactly, right? All right. Hey, it was awesome meeting you. Thanks for coming on, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, take care.
Right, see ya.
So that was my conversation with Teddy von Ranson. Make sure if you're not subscribed, you hit the subscribe button below, and we will catch you next time.